Hello, everybody. Very welcome to the webinar related to the cannabis report that we recently published on Europe, hosted by Prohibition Partners. My name is Barbara Pastori. I'm Director of Strategy and Data for Prohibition Partners, and I'm very happy to be here with Roland, Conor, which is obviously one of our analysts, Roland from Cansativa, Timo from Fluence, and Florian from Cantourage that will help me out today describing a bit the situation in Europe. First of all, I'd like to ask our guests to provide a brief introduction of themselves to present to our audience. Roland, do you want to start?
Thank you very much. So thanks for inviting me. First of all, my name is Roland. I am COO of Cansativa since 2019, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you. Timo.
Yeah. Hello, also from my side. My name is Timo Bongartz. I'm the general manager of Fluence. Fluence is a horticulture lighting company, and we do a lot in cannabis lighting. And I'm very happy to be here in this interesting panel.
Thank you, Florian.
Hi, Florian Holzapfel, my name. I'm one of the founders of Cantourage, and before the time at Cantourage, I was working for Aurora. And we previously founded a company called Pedanius, which we sold to Aurora in 2017.
Thank you so much. Conor, she's the writer, the author of this report that we published this year. Do you want to start providing a bit of an introduction to the report and the key highlights?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Conor O'Brien. I'm one of the analysts at Prohibition Partners. Thanks for having me on, I suppose. I was the writer of the European report. So yeah, I might just give a brief overview of the topics that we covered in the report. I hope everybody has had a chance to look at it. Just to give some context for our conversation. So like some of the things we covered in the report would be the progress of medical cannabis legalization in Europe and medical cannabis access for the tens of thousands of patients across the continent. We look at the growth of the big markets for say Germany, Netherlands, Italy, but also provide some new unreported on data for the kind of smaller but quickly growing markets like Poland and the UK. We take a look at the supply chains and where all this medical cannabis is coming from, the kind of economic landscape of the market so far. We look at the kind of the way imports, where they used to only really come from Canada and Netherlands, how that's kind of slowing down or changing. Where it's coming from now, it's more so production within Europe, or all the producers around the world that are now supplying to Europe. You know, in the first half of Germany, the first half of 2021, we had 17 countries exporting to Germany alone. So we have this massive shift of the supply chain away from, you know, just the older markets to lots of new suppliers. We have around 15 countries that now have active commercial cultivation just within Europe. So, you know, the supply chain is really in flux, and we go into a lot of detail talking about how that's evolving. We look at the patients and products in Europe. So we go into detail on the demographics of patients, who they are, why they're using medical cannabis. And we compare between the European countries and with international markets, and kind of trying to understand why patient population might be different in one country and how this is going to evolve in the near future. We look at the products being used. So the balance of, you know, do patients in the Czech Republic want flower or capsules? They want capsules. Do the patients in Germany want flower or oil? And, you know, for the most part in, say, Germany and the UK, flower is still quite dominant. So we look at these kind of trends. We also look at CBD. So in the realm of CBD, we're kind of, as an industry, witnessing the transition of this massive legally gray market into a proper compliance consumer packaged good market. We look at, like, you know, the European level laws, the novel foods application process, all of that, which is, you know, bringing us into this new era of a proper legal CBD market. And then, maybe last but not least, we have this mini report which attends the main report on adult use and the legalization of adult use in Europe. This is definitely one of the most interesting developments in Europe for people in Europe, but also for the industry worldwide. The report goes into detail on 3 markets, so Switzerland, Netherlands, and Germany. Switzerland and Netherlands are both setting up their pilot trial legalization at the moment. We should see sales in Switzerland probably by this autumn, which is very exciting. And then there's obviously Germany, who've the government have promised to legalize by the end of the legislative period. But there's so much unknowns about, you know, exactly when the legislation will come in, what it will look like. Will it be a pilot trial? Will it be full legalization across the country? So the report kind of looks at scenarios for how the legalization might be rolled out and exactly what it means for businesses, how many people will have access to legal products, and therefore how big will the market be in terms of value. So yeah, those overall, there's a lot more detail in the report, of course, but those would be some of the main things we touched on with the help of our panel here as well.
Thank you. Right, let's dive right in. And I like to start with Germany, which is, of course, the main market everybody is still looking at. So Florian, one of the things we wanted to discuss is, how do you see demand and supply quantities evolving in Germany in the medium, or like near term and medium term, for medical cannabis, of course?
I mean, first of all, I guess we are talking about now the midterm, as long as we're talking about medicinal cannabis. I think supply and demand has changed quite a bit over the last years. We all know that, I think now there's sufficient cannabis available within Germany, and it didn't used to be like that 5-6 years ago when we started here business time in Germany. Right now, I think the question is more about, you know, what kind of flower or what kind of cannabis the patients want to access, and you know, with on specific strains, there might be a shortage, or on specific new products which are introduced, there might be a shortage. But I think overall, there's an oversupply in all categories at this point of time. And at the same time, we still see the market growing basically month by month. but that can be at this point of time, I think, easily captured by the supply, which is just what's introduced by Conor, which is coming from all over the world here to Germany. But as I said, I think it's extremely depending on product. We just introduced earlier this week and last week, for example, a new strain, Mac 1 from Miracle Valley from Canada. It was sold on very soon, while other varieties are not sold out.
Very, very interesting. Of course, like the debate about cannabis going to commodity versus product differentiation is always one that is very, very interesting, I think, for anybody in the industry, like in many sectors. Roland or Timo, what's your view? Of course, you have big ties with Germany as well.
Yes, I'd like to continue. So, as Florian just mentioned, we've seen increasing amount of imports within Germany, but we see that the domestic cannabis now started as well. The second producer just kicked in last week, and we see that this cannabis is coming with a really competitive price within Germany, and this pushes up the sales of this product. The other side, it's there's kind of a price pressure right now, and as Florian pointed out, I think right now, since we overcame the time where supply didn't match the demand, we right now see increasing expectation regards of product quality, product price, product availability, and therefore I think it's necessary to have various import possibilities, but a domestic program as well.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Timo, would you like to add anything on this topic?
Just that exactly what Roland and Florian said. It's the market is right now in flux, and it's always great actually to see a market which have right now a little bit of an oversupply, because then all the producers and the distributors need to really offer value propositions which is benefiting the patients. And I think this is it's a good trend, because it means quality goes up. So I personally like that there is an oversupply right now, because it's increasing or improving the product quality, which is benefiting the patients.
That's fantastic to hear. And in Germany, some other trends, have been noticed, Roland, like I think especially Cansativa's study, like about private prescription in Germany, that's certainly something that is moving the market, as well as the topic of the discounts achieved between private company and insurance. Can you tell us a bit about this topic?
Yes, of course. So if we talk about patients in Germany, there are actually two categories. So one of them, they are reimbursed by public health, and the other ones, insurances, and the other ones are self-payers. And the price level for self-payers in Germany used to be very high, and I'm talking about prices above 20 euros per gram. And due to the domestic cannabis and increasing competition, we saw a price drop over the last years. And that led to an increasing amount of self-payers within the market, because right now it is affordable to go to get a prescription and even pay for your own. And I think we'll see this trend continuing until we've seen a legalization, because then I think this part of the market will move to the adult use market, and but this is not the case for the patients that have the coverage of public health insurances. And as you just mentioned, we've seen new discount agreements coming up in Germany, and this is one of the approaches to increase the acceptance rate for these patients. However, personally, I'm a little bit surprised to see that tool there, because usually these agreements are considered at the end of a product life cycle, when you have generic drugs available, and it's just a matter of which to choose. And therefore, I'm a little bit surprised to see it with cannabis flowers, because there are no generics that you can use instead of a flower. So I'm not quite sure if this is the most promising approach to increase the acceptance rate.
Yeah, it's interesting now because in the end, well, medical cannabis is not patented either. So I mean, at least the type of flowers that we're discussing. So it's the dynamic between patented and generic is sort of like completely changed in this context. So it's interesting to see this market grow. Thank you very much. Of course, a market that has been growing on private prescription actually as a main driver is the UK, and that's a fast, smaller but fast growing one. So I guess like Florian, I'd like to ask, how do you see the UK evolving in the next maybe 5 years? You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, sorry. Based on the fact that we just opened a few weeks ago our own clinic in UK, you can see that I think we are quite bullish on the UK market. You know, the attractiveness at the moment is that prescriptions can be generated and products can be prescribed, and I think it's a big question. How the regulations are going to change. For example, who's allowed to prescribe. We hope that there will be some changes in the future, that more physicians actually can prescribe, not specialists like it is at the moment. So we believe that, in the mid run, the market can be at least as attractive as in Germany. Also in Germany a few years ago, I think everybody expected that the market is going to grow slowly. I think now, we saw a larger growth, and we see now the step towards recreational cannabis. And we've seen that in many other markets that the medicinal cannabis was just the first step. So we expect, to be honest, over the last, if you're asking about 5 years, we expect similar changes in UK, and this is why we are in the market right now.
Thank you. Roland and Timo, do you have views on the UK as a market?
Yeah, I think Florian said it very well. It's a sleeping giant, and it will wake up for sure. And I see it very similar that the access to medical cannabis will increase. We will see a good growth rate, and then ultimately, hopefully, it will also lead to a legalization of recreational as well. So I think this could be the next huge market in Europe.
Yes, definitely on the same page here. I think we'll see a comparable development like in Germany or Canada, like we've seen with the entry gate of the medical cannabis and later on the legalization of recreational cannabis. And I think these are the first big countries within Europe, but I think others will follow the example, because I think it's pretty obvious that it's a good way to go, and it's just, the right way to go, actually.
It's very interesting how these countries like Germany and the UK, which have taken a sort of like private-led approach to the market, are actually the ones that are growing faster, like more promising, whereas other countries are heritage, like Netherlands or Italy, that are heavily controlled by government, centralized approach, are actually much more stagnant. So it's certainly exciting, I think, for industry to see how they can do how well they can do when allowed to do so by local authorities. Well, the UK and of course Germany are one of the new countries that are like engaging in domestic cultivation. So that's definitely an interesting development. So, Timo, I'd like to ask you, so at this point in time, of course, what are the biggest hurdles for somebody setting up a cultivation facility? Of course, there's regulation. What else?
Yeah, to be honest, we touch a lot of projects worldwide at the moment, and the time to market for these growers, for these cultivators, is It's very much depending on the market maturity and the regulative framework, as you said. But I can say that from my point of view, like 80% or so are totally underestimating the time it takes to set up a facility. And the biggest hurdles are, the typical stuff. So first of all, funding. It's difficult to tap into money, so it's very often private equity driven, and it's difficult to get money from banks and so on, because it's still the cannabis industry. So funding is very often an issue. But then another big one is talent. So really setting up a team, having a team, to tackle all different angles, from a business point of view, but also from a quality point of view, from a legal point of view, and then most importantly, of course, the cultivation side. That is difficult, and very often we see that there are great teams and you have a high cash burn rate until you have all licenses and permits in place. So it's for the entrepreneurs very difficult to when to have which talent or which resources in the team. I would say these two, licensing, funding, and or these three, licensing, funding, and really setting up a team are the biggest hurdles. But yeah, once you have that in place, still you need to cultivate and also have good strain selection, which is really meeting patient or consumer demand, so it's a difficult and time-consuming route, which is very often underestimated. You're muted.
Thank you. I was saying, of course, Fluence is involved with lighting, which can be a big cost, not only in terms of let's say the pockets of a producer, but also for environment. So, what do you think about sustainability at this point in time? Like, is it becoming a bigger, kind of like a more interesting issue for new facilities, or when it will become like sort of like very central for cannabis producers?
I think we see it in all different product categories, independent from cannabis, that sustainability is important for consumers. So it will be important in the cannabis industry as well. And this is a good thing, for sure. To think about sustainability already now. And I think that producers, but also, distributors and so on, can develop value propositions in regards to sustainability. I have a little bit the concern that there are, for example, in Germany, but also in other markets, the potential of marketing are limited. So it can be difficult to really communicate these, how sustainable a product is, because it's the what you can advertise is really limited. But yes, I think sustainability will be important, and sustainability throughout the whole value chain. So from a cultivation side, selecting the right materials and consumables, and have a sustainable production, but also then later on in your packaging and delivering the product to the consumer. So throughout the value chain, and not greenwashing, just having good packaging and saying we are a sustainable company, but then having a high energy production which is run by a coal plant next door, that is definitely not sustainable. So I think we see it also in normal horticulture, that we see more and more growers have their own energy, using CHP plants run by biogas and so on. So if you think sustainable in a way of which energy you use, how you cultivate, and how you deliver it to your product, that can be very, very important for consumers later on.
I might
Thank you so
add,
much.
just from my conversations with producers around the world, like part of the sustainability thing ties into the whole supply chain, like where you're growing, you know, the environmental impacts of the location you're growing in, but also like I heard from Tilray, for example, that the moving of so much production capacity from Canada over to Europe, that in itself, even if it's done also for business reasons, I mean, you're cutting out this whole transatlantic journey for the cannabis. It has benefits for the quality and the shelf life of the cannabis, but it also obviously has environmental benefits.
But if I can say something to that, I hear it often, the foot mile or the mile of cannabis moving, but it does not take a lot of volume. It's a CO2 footprint for putting it in a container and move it is not so bad, really. I think much more important is to really look how it's cultivated. As an example, you can cultivate in Poland, but Poland is run mostly on coal, right? They get the energy from coal. So if you run an indoor facility with energy from the grid, then you use mostly coal. But it's the same, there could be another grower in Poland who is having, using solar or hydro, and then it's the same location, but it's just differently produced with different inputs. And I think we need to look much more on the inputs than from where it's coming. Same for example, South Africa, same thing. You can use a lot of sun there, but if you need energy, it's mostly from coal. So that is not sustainable. So I think we need to look deeper to really answer, is it sustainable or not? Not just saying from a packaging or just from location. We need to see it a little bit more holistically. And this is not only true for cannabis, of course.
May I also add here something? I think what I mean when we look at cannabis, what we had in the past as a medicine, and now maybe hopefully moving to recreational. I'm pretty sure that during that movement we would see a lot of changes. When you take a look at other medicines all over Germany, I'm not sure whether patients are asking a lot about the CO2 footprint when they need a medicine. So I think if we are realistic, this is going to come much more once we move to recreation. And I fully agree that the production itself uses most of the energy. It's actually not moving the cannabis afterwards. Yes, and for an example, when there has been the tender in Germany, there have been thousands of questions about everything, but the sustainability around how the cannabis is going to be produced was actually not a factor at all in the whole tender. So you see, on the one side, I think we're seeing the users asking for more, but we also need to have regulators to take a look into that, because at the moment it's mainly driven by individuals and by entrepreneurs who want to produce cannabis with a good economic footprint. But at the moment it's not so important for getting it to the market. But I'm pretty sure this is going to change dramatically over the next years.
Thank you.
To add on that, I think it's just what you mentioned, Florian. If you talk about the medical cannabis market, especially in Germany, it's a comparably young market, and it's quite reasonable that the first goal of the German state was to have enough supply in the first place. As soon as we have enough supply, we'll see a development within the market, and eventually we'll see the demand for sustainability. But I think this will take a while, and we will see that mid to long term. But it will be in line with the overall trend of sustainability issues and demands we have in the society right now.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much. Well, since we were talking about cultivation locations, I'm actually, we mentioned recreational. That's obviously something very exciting is happening in Europe now. So I was wondering, Roland, where do you think the recreational cannabis will come from? Is that going to be mostly domestic cultivation, or do we expect to see like international trade? And of course, what does that mean for regulations on that matter?
That's a very good question because actually it's tough to answer. If you ask me for my personal opinion, I think we'll see a mix like we see in the medical market right now, where we see a domestic program and imports. Because as we just pointed out, I think if you grow all your cannabis indoor using energy instead of using the sun, I think this might be an issue in regards to sustainability and energy consumption. And on the other side, if we look back at the last 2 years, we've seen a high uncertainty of global supply chains. So I think we'll need a mix of both worlds, whether that's possible. But as you already brought up, the regulatory issues we see right now in regards of a recreational cannabis program within Germany still there, and we need to find a solution within Germany and other countries in general, how to being able to have a supply and demand equilibrium that is tough to commit if we just go for a domestic program or just go by imports. I think the mix is the right approach to go, where we have some domestic cultivation, but the international trade as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think Florian, do you have an opinion on this, and particularly can trade happen like a recreational cannabis, like between overseas? Like, is that something that we can envisage like in the midterm?
I mean, as Roland pointed out, I think it's tough to say at the moment how the regulations are going to look like. So it's a lot of speculations, I guess, in the end. But I fully agree with Roland. In the end, it's important to have a variety of products and a variety of products from all over the world, if possible. For me, to be honest, legalization does not mean that specific people can grow cannabis in Germany under very specific rules, and then this is sold. That is not a real legalization. Real legalization would be that cannabis from all over the world can be moved, and there's competition in order to get the best products, the best quality at a good price to German people. And I think it's a lot what we've been seeing in the past. Also on the medicinal side, it's about getting away the stigma. And once people are open to that and also think about cannabis without the stigma, you would question whether you want, and compared to wine or whatever, you would question whether you only want to have and want to buy wine from Germany for a long period of time, or if the market is free, you can get it from all over the world. So I hope that the regulators will come up with a system which is very open and competitive, and this would mean for us that also cannabis can come from all over the world. But as Roland pointed out, I think there are quite some legal and regulatory questions which have to be answered on that path. And it's going to be interesting what the exact solution is going to look like.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly a very interesting topic. So, I mean, talking about recreational, kind of thinking like we've seen like in North America, like how, in a way it can be started in the Netherlands as well, I suppose, but in markets where there is a recreational market, well, medical seems to, kind of grow less or at least slow down. In some cases is even stagnant. Do we expect a similar situation in Germany or Europe wherever legalization will come? Or we think that the setup of maybe medical and pharma in Europe, which is a bit different than North America, will generate different results. Roland, if you want to take it.
Yeah, of course. And just to give an impression of that, back in 2021, we've seen a total market of cannabis in the medical market in Germany of roughly 15 metric tons. And according to our study, we roughly have a split of 50% self-payers and 50% patients under statutory health insurance. And since we still have the issue, I just mentioned that the prices dropped already, it's comparably high for self-payers. And I think what we're going to see as soon as the legislation kicks in, that all these self-payers will move to the recreational market. And based on that assumption, I think we'll see decrease in growth, maybe even a slight decrease in market size of the medical market as soon as we are there. But to consider that, there are important questions to ask, because I think until then we'll see the same price competition that we see now. That's helpful for all the self-payers, and I think we'll see a strong growing medical market until legislation. But I think until then, we'll see the much bigger market, because as I mentioned in the beginning, if we talk about 15 metric tons of German cannabis in the medical sector, we're thinking of 400 to 800 tons in the recreational sector, according to our current black market studies. So we're talking about factors 30 and 40 or up of that. So I think we'll have two different markets, and of course the recreational will be way bigger, and it's just a matter of when and how the legalization will kick in to see how the medical market will continue.
Thank you. Conor, do you have any views on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit when recreational properly kicks off, right? When we look at what happened to the medical market in, say, Canada, you've got the number of patients going up and up and up and up, and then recreational comes in and then it kind of levels off. You see a similar situation in a lot of US states. But their medical markets were a lot more developed. You know, when recreational kicked in for those markets, patient access was already a lot better. So like if recreational kicked in tomorrow, you might expect that medical still has some room to progress before it levels off. But yeah, kind of like Roland said, it probably won't happen for a while, and medical still has a lot of growing to do, probably in the next 5 years or whatever time scale, before rec really starts to impact on it.
Thank you. We have a question from our audience. They're asking about protectionism. So will we see Canada-style policies in Europe preventing import to support the domestic markets? Florian is nodding. What do you think? You're on mute again.
Unfortunately, there's quite some protectionism between the European market. The main issue, I guess, it's it's a single convention, and in addition to that, you know, the medicinal side that we're talking about context. But the question, you know, that's going to change in the future, and hopefully that there is a bigger openness within these markets. But I think we will come to more and more situations where countries and we will make are going to see that when we open up the market, it doesn't make sense to keep up these barriers. I mean, one example for me would be that, you know, right now, if we can access medicinal cannabis here, euros a gram. Now the question is if there's going to come recreational cannabis, if it's just taxed extreme way, like it was suggested by some parties, it might be much more expensive. Then we might come to a situation where recreational cannabis is more expensive than medicinal cannabis, which, you know, wouldn't make most probably a lot of sense, and would quite a question then about who's going to cannabis. No, and I think that is one side, and on the other side, with regard to barriers, we are, within Cantourage, we're actually trying to open up these barriers by importing cannabis and exporting cannabis, exporting from Germany, various countries, and importing from various countries into Germany. And I think, the best thing what we can do is really working on it, and trying to get the barriers down on a daily level. And I think we're quite successful with that. And I think everybody who's in this chat here is doing that. So I think, doing the daily work is most probably the best thing to get down barriers.
Thank you. Actually, I mean, all this chat about international markets integrating, like, it makes me think about CBD. It's kind of it's effectively the first time we're seeing something that is moving, something cannabis based, like an extra, like it is moving so much across border. And of course, it's far from fully integrated, but it seems like consumption is still growing up. And I'm just wondering, like, people on this panel, like, what is your view about CBD? Is this going to stay, or do you think it's a bit more hype? How do you see European customers behaving? Like, if you have an opinion about OTC and a health and wellness product, let's say. I don't know if Timo.
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit, cannabis is it's an interesting topic, and then a lot of companies use that and show the leaf of the plant and make advertisement and say, okay, there's cannabis inside CBD. I think this will go down personally, because the more it's accessible, cannabis in regard to recreational and added use, this hype around it in for lifestyle products, personally, I think will go down. However, it's interesting if we have more possibilities of having different cannabinoids in products, and I think the product itself becomes more interesting than just CBD. So it's an interesting market to see, but I think right now it lives from the overall hype around cannabis, and the more and more the cannabis as a whole, flower and so on, is accessible to consumers, this hype will go down. But that is, we need to see how this will develop. Interestingly, what we are seeing in Switzerland and other markets, that CBD flower is still something interesting, and very often I see in different markets that consumers are using CBD flower and mixing it with high THC to make their own kind of dosing, to balance it out and so on. So it is an interesting topic, and there's still stuff to be explored.
Thank you. Conor, what's your view on the topic?
I mean, from the commercial aspect of it, you've got so many companies now with their products in the novel foods application. So getting properly certified as a consumable product that you can put on the market in the EU or the UK, respectively. So we have whatever, dozens of companies in Europe probably going through the process, and then a lot more in the UK. The big thing there is so say they all get approved. Does that mean that everybody is going to start just be consuming these products from people with applications? Enforcement of the novel foods law is really central in my mind. Like, once we have an approved set of CBD oil products, our police or regulatory agency is going to go to shops and producers and say, you can't sell these products without proper approvals, because otherwise the people with the actual compliant novel food approvals won't feel the benefits. And until then, it's probably going to continue to be a very kind of legally gray and fragmented market with a lot of producers, a low barrier to entry, and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Conor. We have another question. So it's related to medical cannabis in Europe. What can the industry do to sustain and increase patient numbers in Europe? So industry in this case.
I'll start, and please add Timo and Florian. I think the most important thing is education, because right now we see still a lot of doctors who won't prescribe cannabis because there's still a stigma in it. It's cannabis and it's not really a medicine. So I think it's the overall goal, or needs to be the overall goal for the whole industry, to educate everyone and everybody, to make sure to see the advantages, and this needs to be done with clinics and all that, like we see already, because we need evidence that there is the possibility of healing for patients using cannabis. And I think if we can bring that evidence, I think we can bring up the patients' numbers.
Thank you, Roland.
Yeah. I agree. It's all about evidence, and you know, at the end, the gatekeeper is the doctor who's prescribing, and if this gatekeeper doesn't know what to prescribe and for which reason and how, yeah, then this is where it breaks, so to say. So that is the most important stakeholder for the medical market, from my point of view, and their education is still required. But also for patients, right? We see the patients who have serious diseases, which are partly elderly. That if you talk about cannabis, they've, you know, it's very difficult to prescribe it, although they are taking crazy painkillers. But for them, it's a harder drug, and that is something where education really needs to kick in.
I mean, I agree to what Timo and Roland said. And I think it's actually, if you're realistic, it's two things. The one thing is there are, there are physicians which, where it would be good, and they have patients where it would be good medicines to prescribe, but they're not educated, they're not trusting the medicine, they're not, there's not enough evidence in some cases to do that. On the other side, I think there we also have to be realistic. There are some, let's say, users of cannabis which really have a medical reason to take it in the end, but was for some reason not diagnosed. And I think that is the other part. We see now more and more, or let's say that there are patients who would like to have a prescription, but it's not easy for them to get through it. And I think there are some developments now over the last weeks, months, and years that more physicians are actually helping these patients. So I think it's a lot about the stigma, and that is what we have to get away. But on the other side, it's about evidence, it's about knowledge, about education. If we are working on all of that, then we continue to see prescriptions.
Thank you very much. I read our last questions. We're getting to the end of this webinar. Thank you for your answers. So next question is, are we expecting full legalization in Germany or a pilot trial? And when will legalization be enacted? Conor, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, sure. So personally, this is just my personal opinion. We can't possibly know at this point. I'm expecting a pilot trial in Germany. Two main reasons why I think that will happen, and I would welcome full legalization, but there are issues like the supply chain that you'd have to wonder about. But in the coalition manifesto, they say they're going to legalize the sales of adult use cannabis and review this after a period of something like 4 years. That doesn't say it explicitly, but it kind of hints to me that this might be a pilot trial. The second aspect is, and I suspect the reason that Netherlands and Switzerland are only doing pilot trials at this point is that international law allows for the legal sale of cannabis for medical and scientific purposes. The whole pilot trial thing means that you can legalize while collecting data on the effects on users and all that kind of thing. It's within the scope of a scientific project, and this is how it can comply with international law. Unless Germany comes up with some other way to deal with the international law, and we talk about this in the report, I think the pilot trial is the easiest way to start legal sales. But again, just my 2 cents.
Do you guys have an opinion on this?
Yeah, maybe I continue. There is, of course, a part of it what I hope for, and what I think what will happen. But in my case, I think both are very similar. So I think that Germany will just accept that they are not in line with the UN Convention and will break international law, and that they will find countries which are also okay to export into Germany, and that we will see a full legalization. Because to reach the goal of having control over the supply and defeating the black market, you need to have serious supply, and you need to offer it, and you need to have point of sale. So I think they will come up with a bigger program and will try to legalize it fully. I think if we see internationally, this with pilot programs did not really work. What you do, you are kind of decriminalizing the drug, and the black market is flourishing, and then it's really difficult to defeat it in the midterm. So I hope and I think Germany will do a big step.
Thank you, Timo.
I would agree
Roland.
I'm hoping the same. I think we'll see the full legalization. However, this will take longer if we just going for a pilot trial. I think the expected timeline will be 24 to 36 months, considering all the steps need to be taken. But I definitely hope that Germany is considering all the details, come up with the right laws, the applicable laws, and then goes for the full legalization. Why do I think that can happen? I think we've seen the same with the medical program back in 2017. There was a huge step as well, a lot of uncertainty back then. And I think we had some kind of a trial right now with the medical program. We've seen how the market acts and reacts. We right now have our domestic cannabis program running. So I think we have a lot of information within Germany how a cannabis market can work. And I think it's just a matter of detailing how this can be scaled to a full recreational market, and how the education and the restrictions for young adults, for example, can be accomplished. So I'm hoping as well that we see the full legalization within the next 2 to 3 years.
Any closing remarks on this?
Yes, I mean, of course, like Timo and Roland said, I think we're all hoping that this is going to be a full legalization. But I agree, in the end, whether it's full or it's a trial, it doesn't really matter as long as as there are no barriers or limited barriers to get good cannabis into Germany and to get it to patients, but also to consumers then in the future. And I mean, to be honest, we are also not looking too much into how it could be, but what we did at Cantourage, we wrote a paper like 20 pages on what we see, what kind of challenges we see, and how you could take a look at these challenges, but rather to make sure that everybody considers all important challenges, because I think there are only, let's say, a few companies at the moment in Germany which which have experience with all the supply chain, all the issues were also mentioned by Timo and Roland at the beginning, from the production over storage and all these things. And I think it's going to important, or it's going to be very important when legalization is going to come, that all the experiences over the last 7-8 years are actually getting into these laws, so that we will have a successful program or successful legalization. It's not only about legalization; it's about doing that in a good and successful way that people are going to be happy with that.
We hope that both consumers and industry will reap the benefit of the experience from the medical sector when recreational comes in. Right, it's been a true pleasure to moderate this panel. I think it was super informative, so thank you all for your contribution. And thank you, Conor, of course, for your work. We all hope you will download the report. It's available for free. And if you have any questions, of course, get in touch with Prohibition Partners. Bye. Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Conor. Bye, Roland.
See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.